Okay, without further ado, I would like to call my three panelists up to the stage to come join me. Gabby, Tintelo, and Milan, please come choose your seat of preference and let's get into it.
All right. So I'm not going to lie to you, I was feeling incredibly awkward when I had to stand on stage. I realized it's been forever since I've done any form of public speaking, and one of the things that we've been trying to do this year is to really get back to who we were when we started, what our core is in practice being, authentic people, authentic leaders, and an authentic brand. And so I figured it's probably going to be important for me to, even before introducing our speakers, maybe give you the genuine reason why we're sitting here tonight and why Specmo chose this theme. For many of you that have been following my journey, I've been giving hints at the fact that it's been a roller coaster over the last, let's call it 24 months. And in around 2022, 2023, I felt like we were a startup trying to figure out a business model that, was really struggling. And I had a team at the time that was, incredibly devoted to doing their thing. And I had my first ChatGPT moment. I'd spent all of this time, we had built 200 startups, we were immersed in the scene, we thought we knew what was going on. And I felt like I had been caught with my pants down. I felt like this technology was so much further ahead than what I believed it was. I was just genuinely surprised, and I had friends building really cool AI startups at the time, and being in the scene, I still didn't really comprehend it. And through some hard conversations with my team, I basically said, listen, I think this is where it's at. I think we need to pivot here, I think we need to go here, I think we need to really be considering the impact of AI and what it's going to do for our business, what it's going to do for the economy, the local economy, the world. I spent a few months basically on a sabbatical. I was reading, I was researching, I was trying to figure out the impact of this technology. And I just came to the conclusion that what I was seeing wasn't smoke and mirrors, it wasn't a fad. It really was going to change the world. And it felt like the dot-com era and the dot-com bubble where people were trying to explain the internet to people that have never used a computer, and they were like, this shit is not coming. There's no ways everyone is going to have a smartphone that was smarter than the computer that did the moon landing. They're going to have that on their phone, in their pocket, on their person 24/7. I think 1995, the rate of technology and adoption just seemed impossible and unbelievable to people at the time. And even speaking to the South African market and trying to engage with CTOs and figure out are you taking this stuff seriously? I often got laughed out of the room, if I could say it like that. It was years away, it's not coming. And I think everybody in this room has probably realized that over the last year, the rate of progress and adoption has just been ludicrous. It's been crazy to experience and see. And I started to get worried. I started to get really worried for my business, our team, what's going to happen. And I felt this sense of doom. And I was like, shit, here's 2.0, we're going to have to figure out another pivot, another solution, another problem. And then I started to watch the team use the tools that are publicly available now, and the output of the team and the value that we could create for our customers, and just getting back to really solving a core problem that, a tool doesn't solve. You really need to figure out the user and the buying journey and the hurdles and the bottlenecks. And when I saw my team start to use these technologies, I just got this great sense of hope that the future doesn't have to be gloom and doom, that it can be beautiful, it can be bright, but we have a responsibility to make sure that it's distributed evenly, that people have the opportunity to build, to adopt, to leverage, to use. And as a South African that feels like we're in a country that has the potential to get left behind, I almost wanted to call out the innovators in our ecosystem and the space to say, there's all of this bullshit hype on LinkedIn, but are we taking this technology seriously enough? Do we understand the impacts to the individuals, the businesses, etc.? And so, I wanted to put together an event. My team wanted to put together an event, and we wanted to choose a really cool panel that I believe represents key problems in the industry. And Gabby has been a friend of mine for years who can barely find any time with her because she's so deeply passionate about her problem and what she's trying to solve, which I always hate it when, you know, some moderator and panelist gives some cringy introduction that actually robs the person of their own ability to describe what they do. So I'm going to hint at what you guys are doing, but really my first question is like, let the crowd know. But Gabby's doing some really cool stuff in the education space. Then, I mean, Tsopelo, I got on a call with him earlier this week, and there are a few times when I have an engagement that could be, I mean, ours was like 30 minutes long, and I just spent hours and hours thinking about the implications of our conversation. And even today, we're sitting around the lunch table. One of the things we do at Specno is, you know, we cook for the team so that you don't need to leave for lunch. You can actually engage in debate and passion. We're literally talking about some of the problems that you're solving and how it relates to the rest of Africa and South Africa and the average person in South Africa. So, yeah, obviously excited for you to introduce your business as well. And then, I mean, everyone's been shouting about vibe coding and where the world is going and do we need junior developers and what's happening in product and startups in the tech space. And OfferZen is probably one of the most iconic dev companies in South Africa. And you know, Milan is one of the OG venture builders in the space, also running a company here that's very relevant to where we're going. But yeah, maybe without further ado, Gabby, you want to kick us off? Just give us a little bit of intro into who you are, what you're building, and why your problem matters.
All right, I'm Gabby, and I think maybe it was even 2 days ago, I did a little workshop teaching folks how to code with Replit and LLMs just here, which was quite fun. And we were playing with this technology actually with kids. And so let me start with saying what we do. So we're building a platform for teaching kids STEM learning with AI. And really, we partner with schools and universities to deploy AI sort of Lego for learning, if you want to think about that, across the different workflows that educators have, and really to enhance sort of the learning experience for students at the end of the day. And we started this kind of journey I started the journey focused on the problem, which was looking at the shortage of teachers and the need and the massive need for STEM skills in South Africa. So like looking at that problem space and going, well, there will always be a demand for STEM skills, but there are not enough STEM teachers to teach those skills. So really, how do we solve that problem? And we had a couple of assumptions, and one of them was that the way you create, it was originally software, could be a very enabling environment. And then we started playing with ChatGPT, well, it was GPT-3 beta before ChatGPT, so it was really interesting. And looking at how LLMs change the learning process, not just for the student, because now you have this sort of technology you can leverage and ask as many questions and unstuck yourself, as everyone is now using with ChatGPT, but also how does it change the whole classroom dynamic? So what is the role of the educator in that environment if they're not imparting all the knowledge? And what does it mean to be a high agency learner that knows how to help themselves and solve any problem and work on anything? And then obviously there's a big, how do we get more people interested in STEM as a general problem? So that's the problem space we play in, and now we get to work with really cool math, science and engineering faculties and awesome high schools thinking about how to introduce this in their classrooms in meaningful ways that actually drive outcomes and impact.
Epic. Pedro?
Yeah, Gimelan, I'm co-founder and CEO of a company called Botlhale AI. And at the core of the business, we're building AI-powered natural language processing for African languages. And what we've done is that we've built 2 platforms on top of these models for customer engagement. And the reason we started the business really was because of our reality in South Africa and on the continent. In South Africa, you've got a case where about 70% of the population doesn't speak English either as a first or second language. So a big part of the population actually can't express themselves, access digital services properly, and really participate in the formal digital economy. So if you think about South Africa today, you can't register a business online if you don't understand English. You can't open a business online. So people are really being excluded from the formal digital economy. And what we're doing is really bringing businesses closer to these people by giving them tools to better engage and automate to some extent some of the engagement with these customers in local languages to really allow people to participate in the formal digital economy. But we do understand that the technology goes far beyond customer engagement. So we've got APIs that we allow people to use to build all sorts of tools. There's a spelling bee game that runs on our technology. You can do language learning, all sorts of stuff powered by the technology. And really, we just want to empower everyone to build cool tech that can make an impact and allow people to participate in digital spaces.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. I'm Milan. So I guess my main interest is solving problems with making stuff. So it started as mentioned, it's now called the Venture Studio, but basically what I'm interested in is trying to figure out problems that I think are worth solving and probably won't get solved. An old example maybe now is I was very interested in using phones to pay for things, especially people who give money, digital money to people who don't have bank accounts. That seemed like a cool problem. Or how do you build a crypto company in South Africa was another interesting problem from long ago. And generally I have no idea how to solve those problems, so I try and find smart people who know how to solve them, kind of help makers be founders, I guess is the way to explain it. So those, I guess, problems became SnapScan and Luno long ago. Now, so Carrot or Danger, we helped Gabby get going with MindJoy, and also OfferZen, which does developer, matching with companies. But the main vibe is find interesting problems that probably won't get solved. So AI is obviously pretty cool because it's a superpower for solving problems fast. It's a weird career. My mom's not happy with it.
Cool, and then, a question that I might get in trouble for because I'm not very good at keeping to any form of structure, and let's remember that these are humans and busy humans here that also don't have an excessive amount of time to think about any possible question I could have asked. But let's imagine for a second that we are back in 1995, and I'm going to put you guys on a pedestal here, but you're talking to Larry Page or Sergey Brin or Jeff Bezos, and they're young and they haven't built their companies yet, and they're trying to explain the internet and what they're going to build to somebody that just doesn't believe it. Anyone want to take a swing at choosing a time frame, 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 100 years, and paint a picture of how the world changes over that time frame?
Jeez.
And the reason why I asked the question, and bearing in mind it's a difficult question to answer because, where do you go, where do you start? Maybe we'll provide some context, what changes in South Africa, what changes for the average person. But in 1995, if I was sitting there as somebody that is on the cusp of believing that this internet thing is going to be true, and I'm speaking to these guys that are immersing themselves in the scene and the industry, and everyone that is uneducated is telling me that this is bullshit, this is not coming, this is not happening, but I'm speaking to Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Jeff Bezos, and they're trying to explain it to me I want to know what their reality looks like. I want to know what they see the future as. And I know that you're all deep thinkers. You think about your vision, you think about the future, you solve hard problems that take years to solve. Just give us some form of insights into this future that you imagine.
So I think I was thinking there's an interesting difference between AI and drumming. So what's clear to me is there's some people who know about drumming and some who don't. I'm 100% sure of that now. I think with AI it's no one knows. There are some people who don't know they know or don't know, and then there are those who are clear that they don't know what's going to happen. I think with any new technology, it's way clearer in retrospect. So if you look at the dot-com bubble, a lot of people talk about like the crazy valuations of the companies, but like what people forget is most money was lost in laying fiber optic cables, right? Everyone thought that's going to be the thing, because with telephones, that's what mattered. So they kind of took the old thing, like the big money was lost laying freaking cables everywhere. Like it wasn't like Webvan or Pets.com or any of those. It was like we forget that, right? Like it was like so stupid in retrospect. So I think that it's like super dangerous to think you know what's going to happen. I actually wrote it as one of my notes. Like the one thing is no one knows. And it's like a pretty safe starting point. I think if you're comfortable with that and you go, okay, how do I act now? It's safer. So that's not a very nice answer to your question. But I definitely think it's a super interesting technology, but you're probably better off saying, hey, I don't know, but no one else knows either. How do I now act? I don't know if that resonates with anyone, but that's generally what I've got. I can tell you guys a whole lot of stuff, but I had absolutely no idea what Bitcoin's price is going to be, like at all. It just seemed like something cool that like other people were interested in playing around with. If that makes sense. Like, I don't know if anyone in the original Luna or the Switchless at the time team thought like that. They thought it was cool or whatever, but like we had huge debates what it's going to mean, and we were all wrong, I think. That doesn't mean you can't act.
And learn on the way.
Yeah, learn on the way.
Yeah, so I think, if I give you a concrete example with us, we started playing with LLMs because of kids, actually, which is kind of crazy. There's like an old adage that says, kids are where the puck is going, get out the way. And we were working with kids, and we were looking at something really hard, like teaching programming, and how do you teach programming with non-technical teachers. That is essentially the problem, like how we were playing in the problem space. And we spoke to our users, and they were kids, and they were like, I just want to learn about AI. And we had followed that curiosity, we literally followed that. And it turned out we ended up playing with some of the craziest technology with young people, learning firsthand from the actual people whose entire lives are going to be completely different. My niece is going to grow up in a totally AI native world, and that is just so hard to imagine right now, what that's going to look like. I actually have a really hard time trying to go what are all the things, they can make predictions, but then there's very much this thing of skills, you have to adapt really, really quickly. Things are moving really, really fast. That's for sure. And being able to be able to process a lot of information at this moment in time, and be able to synthesize it and action things seems really, really important. And it's a meta skill. A meta skill is becoming really, really important. I think just to be able to interface with this technology, that, everyone's oh, what are the best, talk about UIs and stuff, what are the best UIs going to be? I'll give you a little prediction there for a year's time. In a year's time, we're going to definitely be talking a lot more to our devices, and wanting more text outputs. So we want voice in, text out. I think that's going to influence a lot of different user experiences. It's going to change the way we interact with devices in the world and with each other. And so I think that's a really interesting place to go. But I agree with Milan. I think it's really hard, other than just learn by doing.
I think definitely no one knows, but you can kind of look at what the technology is doing today and kind of see the impact it has on the plans that we've already made, right? So in our space specifically, there's this big push for job creation in the BPO sector in South Africa. Government's planning on creating 500,000 jobs by 2030. So now, based on the technology we're building, based on the technology that's being deployed globally, will that still be the case? We highly doubt. Yeah. Now, what we know is that to a certain level of certainty, things will start to change probably in the next 18 months or so. And then we need to start thinking about how we can adjust our strategies and our plans based on what the technology is doing and what we foresee it doing into the future, so not just today. So like you're saying, right, so speech will be a big thing. I think, some of the biggest consumers of AI across hyperscalers consume speech today. So really starting to think about what reality, what the world looks like in a speech input first society. And I think, you know, to a certain extent, that's what inspired us to start building Motlali. We saw the technology being used across the world, healthcare, customer engagement, all sorts of things, and we're like, African people want to speak to computers too, so why not start building that?
No, epic. Going to continue to ask us a line of questions along that thought, and to now try and read the crowd to figure out if we're going down too much of a rabbit hole and I need to pull us out, and let's see where we go from there. But while I agree that it could be dangerous / embarrassing to try and make a prediction on camera and on stage when this world is about to be so crazy. Like, this was a big week in AI. I don't know if you guys watched Google's I.O. and they jokingly said that they were going to introduce the AI counter to see how many times they mentioned AI during their pitch. And luckily they mentioned Gemini more than they mentioned AI. But it was ridiculous to see some of the things that Google is putting on display as a teaser for where they believe the trends are going and where they're going to shape the world. And then in other news, OpenAI goes and acquires Johnny Ive's company. I don't know if you guys know this. Johnny Ives is the guy that helped Steve Jobs invent the iPhone. And during the interviews, he refers to the phone as a legacy device, as if he understands that the next platform shift, the wave of computation, is going to move away from the devices that we see and understand today. And I personally, I've always suffered from learning disabilities. This week I was told it was dyslexia instead of ADHD, who knows, but I was talking, we're working in the autism space and we speak to a lot of people that diagnose learning disabilities. We're working in AI in child education for autism and neural learning and whatnot. And I recently installed something called Super Whisper on my computer, which allows me to talk to my computer in any single app, and it'll paste the text in there, and you can pre-format your text so that you can change the output depending on where you're working and what you're doing. And for years, I have been struggling to have humans understand me. It's one of my biggest weaknesses as a leader. I ramble. I'm unable to bring my thoughts down into something that's easily ingestible, is concise, and I call her Nova. But Nova, she's the most patient being in the world. She will listen to me ramble for hours and then really dissect what it is that I'm trying to communicate, and I can ask her to empathize as the person that I'm trying to communicate with. And my ability to communicate with humans has never been this productive at this level. So I'm already seeing platform shifts shift the way that I work. It's literally been I spend hours every single day talking to my computer as if it has a name. I'm fully there. And I do think that, while it might be risky to list some of the trends, I think the rate at which we're going to see adoption and platform shifts and things happen, it might catch you all with your pants down. If you're not starting to think that these crazy ideas are maybe things to take seriously, start researching, start playing with, and just see for yourselves, how do these work? Are these that's kind of the point of tonight. I'm going to be worried if we're not all there. I try to tease some hints towards, part of the conversation and where we might steer this to, and just, lead it. And I mentioned to Tupelo, I am not 100% sure whether we're going to go down this route or not. We'll judge it out, but, I do feel quite compelled here. Milan earlier is talking about solving problems that other people don't want to solve. If you can figure out the size of the problem and that it's worth solving, you basically created a moat for yourself. You've made sure that you can build a business in a space that you've got a multi-year head start on dominating, and if you've already worked out the commercials behind it, it's kind of about, are you prepared to spend the next 10 years of your life building something meaningful? And kind of what I spoke to Tupelo about this week is, when I think about AI and the shift of AI, there's two frames of thought. The one is, how does AI impact every person in this room?
And my bet is that you guys are all here to think about how does this increase your productivity at work? How does this impact your ability to automate some of the functions of either your job as an employee or your job as a business? You know, how can you output more? How can you create more value? And value is so easy to measure, when you're working in the world of commerce and you're using finance as your point system to measure value. And we can go into a huge debate on how corporate South Africa is about to be smacked left, right, and center from how quickly the rest of the corporate world, I'm talking global corporate world, is adopting solutions. How quickly startups are, playing in the territory of corporates, and they need to watch out. But then there's a whole other side of the coin to say, how does this technology affect the average person in South Africa? What are the changes that they want to see? And if we, as people that are solving problems and have the ability to solve problems, how do we make sure that we're solving for both sides of the equation? So, I pose it to Pella, but if any one of the three of you want to jump in board, like how does this technology impact the average person? And what responsibility do we as a crowd, as a movement of people, as makers, as tinkerers, what is our responsibility to make sure that we're building AI as inclusively as possible?
Yeah, I think if we think about South Africa specifically, to measure the value of AI, at least its impact, it will be based on the ability to make services and a lot of things more inclusive for the average South African. And I do think none of us in this room represent the average South African. So the average South African doesn't have proper access to really important services, healthcare, legal, education. So once people can start having proper access to some of these, then we can start measuring the value. And I think there's a lot of work that's being done to ensure that that does happen. And on the other side, there's the opportunity that comes with AI, that people now can start building alone as solo entrepreneurs. They can research and get access to information that they previously couldn't. So I think there's massive opportunity, but at the same time, again, going back to the jobs thing, is that we have a massive unemployment issue in South Africa, especially at like the entry level, right? So if you consider skills, so a lot of people have entry level skills struggling to get jobs. That's also impact, and it's not a problem that we should kind of hope it's going to fix itself. We need to intentionally think about this problem and start solving it. So I think there's a lot of like positives in terms of service delivery, which we've been struggling with as a country for a very long time. But on the other hand, it's, what about the jobs issue? What about unemployment? What are we doing about that? Yeah.
So I guess what I find like ridiculously exciting about let's call it like the current AI tools, they make computers way easier, like more human, basically. So an easy example would be dyslexia. We take that as an example. If you take old school coding, it's a bunch of really intricate symbols in the right sequence. Like very practically, I don't have dyslexia. If you do, and we've got to work on a thing, I'm going to be faster than you. Or I used to be faster than you. Okay, just on that. That means it cuts out a whole lot of people. Then if English isn't your first language or you're not very fluent in it, documentation's in English, blah, blah, blah. So you take one of these like kind of practical stuff, typing is a very weird thing, right? Like my 2-year-old daughter happily tells the Amazon Echo what song she wants. She can't type. It's just way more natural. So what I'm finding, the like Super Wisp is a great one. Like it's a game changer for me, but like some of my friends who are dyslexic, it's like absolutely life changing because suddenly they're like insanely productive. And it's like the stupid thing, like why should that hold you back? Or why should the fact that you weren't like raised in an English household hold you back? And that's kind of flattened out. So I think like for someone like me who is relatively fluent in English, and at least who's reasonably good at like writing weird symbols in sequence, it doesn't matter that much anymore. So a lot of the like innovator people though, because of the past, that's the kind of people who used to build startups. But that doesn't matter, I think, much at all anymore. I don't know what that's going to do. I think the obvious thing is like more people should be making stuff because they can. Like they just need to know that. So I think that would be my one like very strong thing is the skills needed to make stuff has like massively been commoditized, distributed, democratized, whatever you want to call it. So that's going to do interesting things. I don't know what the technology is going to do, but if people closer to problems can solve them insanely fast, I think that's generally the bottleneck in innovation, knowing what problems are worth solving, knowing someone who knows them well, and that gap like has been completely annihilated already. Like the current models are good enough. If no innovation happens in AI ever again, the world is going to change completely just from that.
That's the type of prediction I've been looking for.
Yeah, I guess I've also found I'm also a Super Whisper fan and also dyslexic, so I'm very grateful for those kinds of technology, like the ability to interface with the computer in many different ways. And when I remember spell check when I was in high school was such a contested technology, whether I was cheating or not as a dyslexic using spell check at school, which is like kind of hilarious. So instead I had to get a spelling exemption to not be penalized for my terrible spelling. It's a strange thing because I wasn't allowed to use a computer to write my essays. But anyway, yeah, so that's like it's an interesting one. Now all the kids are using ChatGPT to write their essays for them, so we've got other problems. Perfectly spelled completions. But yeah, I think the modality of interfacing with computers in so many different new ways is so exciting, and it's not just, I think we're going to see a preference for speech because it's like the fastest way we have right now to input into computers and to like kind of collaborate, like that human-AI collaboration. That's partly why it's exciting. I also think that the vision stuff is also really interesting, like what flipping the real-time vision stuff on and seeing what you can see in the world now with AI too is also a really exciting opportunity for connecting to your problems, your local problems, or seeing things or learning about the world around you in ways you never had before. So, if I was interested in something and I flipped like ChatGPT's vision mode on and I asked a question about it because I wanted to know I wanted to give attention to what I was seeing and wanting to know about. All of a sudden, that like moment I was interested in something can be fed in a very rich way. And I think just those feedback loops are tremendously powerful in helping humans grow. Like feedback makes things grow, it doesn't care what. So I think there's something really interesting, more people who actually engage with the world and try and do with the technology, have these rich, very rich feedback loops. And I think that's a hard thing to really predict what is going to happen.
Sick. We're about to, in a way, speak about feedback loops again. And this, depending on how well the crowd participates, because I'm going to use all the time that I have. So if you guys aren't asking questions, I'm going to ask more questions. But kind of my last question, I think it requires some context first. But like I mentioned, Specno is, at least from myself, leading Specno, is going all in AI. And I'm trying to think about where's technology going to be in a year from now. And, again, to Milan's point, I already think that the technology that is available today, I don't believe that genie's going back in the bottle, but just the technology that we have today is already powerful enough to help coach many of Specno's consultants through problems where it's not just about coaching them through problems as much as it is, building out the way in which you prompt them through problems, because all of a sudden you need to be able to clearly articulate your set of values, how you're trying to build, how you want to access the market. And so, basically at Specno, what we've started to do is build a per employee profile that has as much data on each employee as what we can possibly capture in terms of their experience, their learning style, their medium of learning, how they enjoy learning. And what we're trying to do is build a bot that is effectively
their AI assistant helping them in every conversation that they're having. And the idea will be that they can just make a note mid online chat and say, hey, build me this thing. There's a set of agents that are really helping them do their work more effectively. And even today, we're trying to transcribe and record every conversation so that we build deep knowledge of our business model, how we operate, our core set of values. And this thing's ability to channel through huge amounts of conversation. What are the key drivers of your business? At the end of the day, people overcomplicate business, but what are the core things? We've stopped talking about this bullshit on the wall as most companies do. The values you set on the wall are not your actual behaviors that people bring into conversation every single day. That's what it should be. You should really be living by the things that govern you, your decisions as an organization, as a company, as you create value. And one of the things that we're doing is creating custom learning paths. We're identifying skill gaps, both in technical skills, soft skills, etc. And then based on an employee's preference of learning, their experience, we're tailorizing and personalizing a learning tree, and managers are reviewing it against what we're trying to show and demonstrate and grow, etc. And as we rolled out this solution and we started speaking to employees about it, my team is also very cynical that AI is going to be the Skynet event and take us all over, and they care a lot about the alignment problem. How do you make sure that if we're being coached, we're not being coached to preference genocide or terrible things? And at first I laughed, but it's a very legitimate problem. How do you make sure that if we're adopting solutions from the West or China and solutions aren't being built for our local government or context, for our own businesses, how do we make sure that we're aligning our intention and our strategy? And I realized for most people that are just scratching the surface of AI, they don't understand the problem that is alignment. Do any of the three of you want to take a swing at just what is it and how do you solve for it as you're educating children, as you're trying to preserve language and culture? I don't know how it relates to today, sorry Milan, but you can take a swing too.
So I think if you look at the AI recipe, right, it's like infrastructure, data, talent, and resources. And the data component is very important. So you need contextually relevant data for whatever you're solving. And we still don't have a lot of that that's available, clean, and ready to train a lot of models that will understand our reality as South Africans and people on the continent. So, and it's something we come across quite often. So one of the reasons that we don't have super accurate models that understand African languages is because there wasn't a lot of data that was readily available for people to use. So that's one thing, one area where we could start. There are a lot of people who have access to data, not using it for various reasons. The call centers, the government, and various organizations. So really trying to find creative ways to allow us to build using this data without compromising anyone that the data might point to. And I think having control over the data that we train these models with is very important, because we don't want to just rely on models from the West trained on ideologies from the West, pushing very specific narratives that we might not necessarily align with. I think there was a very interesting example on X or Twitter recently when Grok was kind of throwing weird hints when people were asking it about something completely unrelated. So there's definitely a lot of risk, and we do need ownership of these models, especially considering how deeply entrenched they are in our everyday lives.
I don't just on the data thing. I have mixed feelings about this. So I'm not sure, necessarily on what level, I think organizational data or metadata and stuff that's useful for specific use cases and maybe fine-tuning models, but on the infrastructure, sort of training models, LLMs, I'm not sure about I'm not sure about that because you seem to get performance out of, well, depending on where you're building, you can align, if you talk about alignment, and getting cultural context, you can deal with that on a system level, on a system problem level. So, I don't know, the models are getting better and better, and then dealing with how you align it based on who your organization's values or your customer's use case. I'm not sure there, like my opinion has changed on this one. So for example, like you can now use an IP address to help an LLM contextualize something and give more relevant examples than you having to train on very, like, you know, I don't know, like it gives you South African references or Cape Town references. If the system knows that the user is in Cape Town, it will, and you are using a system prompt where you're saying, okay, well, give examples that are relevant to where the user lives. It'll know how to do that. So I don't know, like as an example, I'm not quite sure on where the like data sovereignty. I'm not too sure on that. My perspective has changed over the last like year or 2 years on this. So that's just something like I think that you've got to be really deliberate on figuring out like what data you're using and to what end, and really with LLMs is it going to get you improvements in 6 months' time that are still relevant. Because I think the old paradigm of machine learning and what we now have with the deep learning stuff has fundamentally changed. And so, I don't know, that's a little different take. I'm curious.
Sort of on the topic of alignment, there's a great Joseph Stalin quote that says like quantity has a quality of its own, and that is basically the story of LLMs, right? Like you just took I hope there's no one actually building transformer networks here because it's a terrible like bastardization of the papers. But like I read them and I couldn't understand them, and then I got it's like, okay, they chucked more GPUs at it, and then like something new happened. Yeah. Right? Like that's kind of what I got. They just kept adding quantity of data and stuff. And a lot of this quantity comes from the internet. And like if you've ever been on the internet, right? Like the actual internet. Not like the landing page, like a few years back before Google cleaned up like YouTube comments, right? Like never mind 4chan or Reddit or whatever, right? Like the internet is a pretty mad place. And that is the primary source of the training. So like it's always useful to remember that idiot in a forum somewhere. Yeah. That is the source of the training for the LLM. You're not asking like, which I do, like, what medicine should I give my daughter? Just try and remember that's where it comes from. So, like, it is an idiot in some sense because the people who trained it, us, we are idiots on the internet. So I think the alignment stuff helps a lot. And just like, I've got a theory that might be interesting to you guys, just on the topic that it can be done. So Afrikaans as a language is really weird, okay? And the reason it's weird is it's one of the few things that had massive state, other than French, I think. French is a bit bigger, but Afrikaans had massive state subsidies in all ways, right? Like, apartheid government put a huge amount of effort into forcing people to speak the language, to translate things in it, and. So Afrikaans is a massive outperformer in how good LLMs understand it. Compared to any other language with that amount of speakers, because like basically no one actually speaks Afrikaans, like on a global scale. But if you look at how good the language performs, like LLMs understand and can speak it, it's insanely good because the learning set is really good. Because for quite a number of decades, people irrationally put money into translating stuff into this relatively obscure language. So I guess there are two interesting things about it. It's like one, wow, it works really well for Afrikaans. But two is you can definitely duplicate that by just putting similar effort into digitizing other like languages at scale, just giving it solid training sets. Like it's a very weird, it's an inadvertent side experiment that has a kind of an interesting result in it.
The other thing, just on alignment problems, which is there's a question of who gets to decide. Like, is it the end user that is deciding, like, you know, we all get to sit at...
Or thinks they're deciding.
Or thinks they're deciding, but like, is it the end user? Is it your customer? Like, who's actually where are we aligning? And like, is that a centralized process or like a decentralized thing? I think that's a really tough question.
So, I mean, look, I tried to spur conversation that needs to extend beyond this room. You know, I think that this is actually a government level decision that needs to be had.
Oh, that's scary.
I know. But like, let's also recognize that these technologies are the ultimate propaganda machine.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you're trying to think about how do you either build a rebellion or make sure that you have, you know, a society that is incredibly happy with the rate of performance of the government and how things are going, well then, you know, access to this, these technologies. Let's just say that our government decides, you know, I'm going to use real world examples, might get myself in trouble. China's LLM is free for our population, but America's is paid. It's going to have a huge implication on how our people then view East versus West. So, you know, yes, there is parts of that fall on the end user, but at a government-wide level, if we're not already engaged in thinking about how these technologies are going to shape education and children and people and democracy, I am genuinely worried about the countries that are viewing this as their propaganda machine and tool and have the ability to come to Africa and dictate Africa's future. That for me is what I'm scared of, and I think that we have a responsibility to at least be acknowledging that there is important conversations that I want to hear someone have. I just want to feel confident that somebody that has the ability to influence and make a decision is caring about how AI impacts our country, South Africa, and our people. So that was my last question. Should we open it up to the crowd?
So I have a question for Tapelo. I think Tapelo might be one of the most important people in this room right now. We're talking about technological trends, but we also need to keep in mind human capital trends. And that human capital trend that matters the most in the world right now is based on this continent, because we're going to have the most youth in the next few decades. But we have not democratized access to the most fundamental technological shift that has happened in our lifetimes with AI. But what you're doing is ultimately making it accessible to everybody. So my question to you, we're talking about the players that are going to make sure that this is available widespread. Have you had any engagements with policymakers or legislators or governments, not just South Africa's, but perhaps other, you know, leaders in other African countries that are supporting the work that you're doing? Because I don't know if perhaps the people in this room realize how insanely important it is to make sure that every single African child, the tinkerers, the makers, the innovators of tomorrow, are able to utilize this technology to its absolute full advantage. So have you received that support in any shape or form? I would love to know.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for that question. So the simple answer is no, not quite. And part of it is because of how slow they tend to move, right? So we started thinking about this and building this pre-ChatGPT, so it wasn't sexy by any means. And what we were telling people at the time, what we were telling them was going to become, you know, reality, they didn't believe. It's a bit different now because they've got like very personal relationships with the technology. No one will publish their chats, you know. But still, I think that problem that we had a couple of years ago is still true today, where you go to government or a specific state agency to get support, and it takes them 2 years to make a decision, right? So the technology you're building or the state of technology in general is very different when they come back with an outcome. So there was a specific agency we were talking to, I think this was 2021. We still haven't heard from them. We get an email every like quarter saying, hey, we're still reviewing. So it's quite difficult in that sense, but I know there's like certain groups that are actively doing work that we engage with from time to time as concerned citizens, you know, like Daniel said, really thinking about how the technology impacts our communities, not necessarily looking for support, but just contributing.
So my question here is also for Tapelo, so flavour of the month. I also happen to be potentially one of the more elderly gentlemen in the room. There's a couple of us who potentially pushing around the 50 zone, there and thereabouts. Teenagers. I think South Africa's unemployment in the youth is about 45.5% officially. What I'm hearing more practically is this technology is going to level the playing field. So it's about access, right? Inclusion. How do I get access into a system that was designed by a group of people who are other to me, right? That's a long debate in and of itself. So the question, I think more practically, is not, does this give me access into a system that I didn't have access to before, or does it give me the opportunity to create my own system, right? So is it about enabling people to create their own jobs, their own wealth, their own economy, or is it about giving them the ability to access one that exists, or both, right? So for me, it's more about how do I take this technology and enable a 16, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old to create their own opportunity versus get access to somebody else's opportunity, because that, I think, is the more powerful opportunity, right, or the more powerful option, although it should be both. So it's interesting around how am I enabling people to use the technology, not just to help them understand it, or to give them the opportunity to be like the guy next to them, but literally to create their own opportunity. So whether it's about, I don't know, understanding economics in my own language, or understanding how to create value in my own language, but it's more about how can I generate my own ability to have wealth and the ability and the means to create something versus just access to somebody else's. I don't know if you've thought about that, or the concept of what it means to help people understand how to use this to generate value versus just understand how I can know more, learn more, whatever else it might be. I don't know if there's a question in that or a statement, but it's something in that mix over there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think South Africa is interesting in that we've got a strong sense of entrepreneurship, right? And some of it is because of necessity. It's not because we want to. You look for jobs, there aren't any jobs or opportunities. So, and that's why our informal economy or sectors is so massive, right? So I think we should by no means underestimate what could happen if people just have that bridge, that access to the technology. I think a lot of people are self-starters, as long as we, if we can help bridge that gap to allow them to do this thing that's been stopping them. There's someone, I was in Joburg on Wednesday, yesterday, and someone came to me and said, look, I built this website overnight, and they were so excited, right? And this is someone who has absolutely no tech background, but they're starting a business. They put up a website for their business, and now they can start operating and sharing all of this, right? And that's just a simple example. But I think really bridging that gap or that barrier and enabling people or empowering people to take action is what we need. So I see it as both, right? So access to opportunities by just getting information, existing opportunities, but also allowing them to create their own opportunities.
Maybe if I can add on to that, look, I'm trying to solve it at a very different level, but Specna's original mission, I'd gone off to Silicon Valley, I felt like I'd, seen what people should be working on, and I wanted as many people working in technology and on technology and building startups as possible. Read all of the startup playbooks. The goal was, let's help 1 million entrepreneurs build a digital business by 2030, and let's work backwards from that goal. And with the first 200 businesses we built, I felt like we needed to start by just figuring out how to build the first few, and then we will become the leaders of product, and we will have case studies, and we can then get people to start following our learnings and whatnot. Basically since day one of starting, I've been trying to think about how do I get young people, which in my opinion is going to be the majority of tomorrow's tinkerers and builders, how do I get them to take the initiative, to want to solve and build problems. And while I definitely think access is an incredibly core pillar, I've also seen how a direct link to understanding incentives is so crucial to getting people to want to access free content. Anything in the world you can learn on YouTube right now. How many people are spending their evenings on YouTube instead of on Netflix? And the reality is, I think that access is going to make sure, like, we need to democratize access to technology, but then we also need case studies, success stories, making sure that a little boy or girl, and I don't come from a township, so it's difficult for me to speak about this, but at the same time, I can only imagine how important it is for them to see somebody who looks like them, sounds like them, access technology, and then through that technology, change their life and improve their lives. And that is where I think it won't, like we like to say in the startup community, it takes a village to build a startup. This cannot be any one person's mission. This requires a movement of people that have decided that we're going to build a better future. And again, that is the core of what this event is meant to be about. Like, hopefully you look around the room at people that want a better future, want to solve for that better future, and are willing to work on it. And yeah, I love the three that are on stage today who are they're not talking about it, they're doing it. So from me to you guys, thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay. Oh.
I've got a question, or more a statement. The question was answered a little bit earlier, so I'll leave you with this message. My name is Francois. We've built machine learning models for Tour de France and NASCAR. I've been doing it before it was cool. And one thing that's particularly interesting about this audience here is that I think it was the World Economic Forum that published research specifically around what the population of Africa is actually going to do in the next few years, right? And in the year 2030, 40% of people under the age of 30 will be in Africa. Right? Now, if we look at the challenges associated with joblessness and unemployment, you might say that's a big problem. Right? But when we think really about what the internet has done in this world of ours, and being able to enable people in Africa to ship their skills abroad and be able to democratize access to market, it's actually a big unlock, right? And so when we think about where we're at right now, here today, with access to this new technology, where my gardener, who was born in the rural South Africa, uses his smartphone to figure out how to turn the compost heap in the most effective way, right? Then we're talking about democratizing access to the world's markets using these tools, right? And so when I look around at the people in this room, I would argue that each and every one of you have a responsibility to build a business that will enable South Africa and the greater Africa to leverage this unique opportunity where we've got the world's working force in our midst in the very, very near future that we can leverage to actually produce value not for ourselves and accelerate our own growth, but also create immense value for the world, right? And maybe play a positive African tune to this song we've started playing tonight here with the drums.
No, I think just sort of a few people have said it, like one of my, I guess maybe my strongest belief is that like generally people are smart and like they definitely understand their own problems better than I do, or others do. Like that's I guess one of my like key beliefs. And I think that like assuming that a government or you or whatever know better what someone's problems are, it's like it's a slippery slope. So I think what makes like the current AI stuff really exciting is if you just start with the assumption that like generally people are smart and they understand their problems, like if you can think what can you do as an average person in South Africa who does have a smartphone and data, like the vast majority of South Africans do, you couldn't do much 5 years ago. Like if any of you have ever tried to code on a phone, it is an absolute pain. Never mind if you can like watch the YouTube videos on coding. And the other interesting thing, if you just think of YouTube, is if you've gone to university, you learn a meta skill on how to learn stuff, which allows you to learn something off YouTube. If you haven't done that, it's kind of hard. Like what Mind always figured out, and that's like not that obvious, because it's not like a skill, you didn't write an exam on that, but it's actually freaking hard to learn a thing baseline if you have just the content. Then meta skills you need to learn, where if you're in a situation where you don't learn those meta skills, you're kind of stuck. So when you see YouTube and someone else sees YouTube, they don't have the same kind of like API to it. The interesting thing is I find like the LLMs are pretty good at that. Because you can just go, I don't know what to do, I want to make a website. And then you're like, I still don't know what to do. And it will find a level where it takes you through it. And I think that part is quite game changing. So I'm actually of a belief that like access is enough. Access in language matters a lot. Like that you can't like magically Englishify your brain or whatever. Someone needs to solve that problem. But I strongly believe once you have access, like people, like if you can just give people access, they're better custodians of their own problems and therefore solutions. So I'm very much against overall kind of like we should make it like so. We just need to give access to people and they will solve problems. That's kind of like my high level of AI. Even on practical things like you can code on a phone, which you couldn't do before. Most people have a phone. Make data cheaper even. Like that gets Starlink in rural areas, whatever. That's kind of my view on the most practical thing I think to do. OpenAI also, Google is going to just develop a better model. We don't need to worry. They'll do that and they'll compete with each other to give it to us really cheaply. Thanks, guys. We don't need to do it.
I was just going to say, like, actually what we need to do is make sure that we're aligning the humans around meaningful problems. Like, that's the actual, like, I think that's the hard thing, is how do we make more people want to solve hard problems in the world, want to work on important things, want to be the engineers, the scientists that are going to actually create new knowledge in the world and drive progress. And that is a much bigger problem, actually. It's like humans aligning themselves, and maybe, like Milan says, if it's top down, I don't know if that's actually going to end up well, but if we can have all these small communities of people gathering about things they're caring about and tinkering and making, then that's really where we're going to create new knowledge in the world.
Someone should really create a company that like really teaches and encourages STEM.
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa and I run a business called Citizen Code. We work with civil society organizations like UNICEF in humanitarian settings, creating technology to solve problems. I'm so freaking excited that I'm at a tech event and literally almost everybody is talking about access today and building meaningful technology. I have a kind of question and a kind of point. You can decide what to do with it. You asked an interesting question earlier to think back to 1995 and how you'd explain the internet. And I sat there and I was like, well, in 1995, the typical South African was not thinking about the internet. We were thinking about democracy and we were thinking about our future coming out of that. And that shows a big problem about access and equality and everything, right? And I thought about if you ask this question in 30 years' time, 35 years' time from now, what would our primary problem be? It sucks that we still have the same sort of problem, right? So anyway, in this mess of thought that I had, I was just like, how do we encourage technologists to think more meaningfully, right? And I think we have a very unique and interesting opportunity as South Africans to think about things from a point of access. How do you build anything for the average user first and up? I am so uninterested in Google's latest trend, and this is only because I'm bitter because I deal with a lot of very crappy problems in the world. But how do we start to think about what are the trends here that we need to solve, right? And when I look at things that are built in Silicon Valley, and somebody's going to argue with me after this about this, but it's okay, I'll take it. It's just not so interesting because it doesn't solve problems meaningfully. I think AI has done an interesting thing, which has we popped up the hood and we actually see a clearer vision of what our problems are in the world. The lack of access to not only African languages, but mixed coded languages. It goes to show that our histories as people of color in this continent have not been documented. It's not enough information. And so if we're going to solve problems, then we probably need to invite an archaeologist into the room too and start speaking about our identities, our cultures and our beliefs, because that is what makes up a language. And so my question/problem that I have a very difficult time at the moment with funding in tech for social impact because of the crisis that we're in the world. How do tech organizations identify organizations like ourselves who have GBV interventions and have used artificial intelligence to identify sensitive disclosures? How do I understand when a woman in an African setting is in danger? Right? We've done a lot and we're kind of stuck at the moment. So maybe we need to figure out ways where we can work better together, or maybe more of an openness, opening up the door and saying, hey, come and sit inside our house for a while and let's help you progress your technologies further. I don't know if that makes sense, but thank you very much. This panel was really interesting.
I can have a stab at trying to, I don't know, respond in some ways, but I think one thing we can, there are lots of problems in the world and lots of things also, we want to solve. And I think we also have to balance that with some level of optimism of where we want to go, because if we're always looking down, solving problems, we also don't create a vision for the future or create almost direction for ourselves and use that as a way to make progress. So that's one thing, and I think incentives then matter a lot to go, okay, well, where do we want to go? How do we, Daniel mentioned this earlier, but like aligning incentives is like, what do people value and what are people going to invest in and care about? I think you can do a lot of impact work if you understand like what people are willing to pay for. Like, I don't think tech and impact are mutually exclusive. I think incentives, though, are fundamentally important to manage. Like education, for example, is a notoriously hard problem in terms of impact, and building an education business is not an easy thing because most people believe that education should be free, right? So you have to now build a business in a place where people think everything should be free. Like how does that work? How do you progress? Well, that's an interesting one to solve then. Like, well, if you can really figure out how to solve a problem and do good, then and something people are willing to pay for, you start doing something sustainably, and that lets you like keep doing it. So I don't know if that's useful, but I think incentives do matter.
I think one of the great things about building in South Africa is that impact isn't by choice. It's almost always there. So you look at a lot of companies like Sweep South, right? You think it's about convenience, but they've created a lot of jobs. And that's great. You look at Offizen and what they've done, right? They've allowed people who generally wouldn't be exposed to certain opportunities to now have opportunities, expose their portfolios and profiles and skill sets. And so I think that's one of the beauties. It sucks that it's that way, but like you don't have to think too much to have an impact. And in terms of like collaborating and working together, I think events like this, and there's a couple of them in Cape Town, are great for that, right? Connecting with people really passionate about specific problems, and sometimes the people aren't as passionate as you are, but they might have a specific skill set or access to a certain thing that could potentially assist you in the journey that you're on. So yeah, just two thoughts there.
I've got a question for everyone, but related to your point. I want to ask this earlier. How many of you guys have coded an app with AI of any sort, like an actual app that ran? Roughly, looks like half, which is really awesome. If you haven't, I want to say do that. Like really do it, like do it tonight type thing. And you will be done like before 12 o'clock, I can promise you. You can ask, Ethan's a good guy, he helped me get started quickly, like something like Replit is good. The reason that matters is, I think, let's ignore good intentions and you just look at capitalism, right? A lot of problems especially like South Africa is a small economy. Okay, so we don't matter that much to Silicon Valley on a numbers game. It's not going to customize stuff for us. If you then look inside, South Africa is a pretty complicated place. We've got many languages, many people, many situations. So if you look at all of those problems, it's like this nest of like increasing like small little problems. Apps used to be quite expensive. Like apps are damn useful. So if you have an app for a problem you have, generally it's like an amazing thing. But like let's just say on average, let's just say an app costs like R1 million. Okay, roughly, like a solid app that you can use for stuff that's gone through iterations, like order of magnitude, somewhere between 100,000 and R1 million. And the devs, going, oh no.
Yeah.
When a customer's done defining their MVP, times that number by 10.
But what the interesting thing is, so let's say it's $1 million is actually a small amount, you're saying. Yeah. Okay, cool. Like R1 million is a hell of a lot of money. Okay, and then it was like, that doesn't get you an app, it gets you 10% of an app.
For customers that don't understand Scotland, for sure.
Sorry. Okay. Like the interesting thing, I think, and try this, just like make an app that solves a problem you have, like one for yourself. You can do it in a few hours. That used to be of the order of magnitude 100,000 rand to do the equivalent, right? Unless you were a coder and whatever and you didn't pay yourself to do it. So I think that's going to be the game changer on a lot of these problems is the value of problems is going to increase and the value of solutions has already decreased. We just haven't quite caught up. Because like people haven't quite realized, hey, they can build solutions and they should like be valuing the problems more. Because it used to be that like the problem's a small little thing and the solution is like millions of rands of app. At least for the first few iterations, the MVP or whatever, then I said, that's gone now. You can get a fully functional thing that like works and says, hey, this solves a problem. And that's often the thing that stops like a capitalist market from solving a problem, is it doesn't have confidence it's going to get paid. Yeah. If you, and you don't have to be a coder to do that, you can bridge that gap. And you can go, oh, this works. Look, I built an app for a single school or a single soup kitchen. Like that, no one is going to, like if you say a soup kitchen has spent R1 million building an app to, let's say, track inventory or whatever, you'd be like, that is absolutely insane, it's a waste of money. But if someone running it spends an evening doing that, and then goes, hey, this is really useful for us, that changes the dynamic completely. I don't know if that makes sense, like that, like value problems. But to really start valuing problems, that's why I'm like, just code an app. You have to have a visceral feeling for how easy it is to just prove out an initial solution. I want to warn you, it does get harder later, but once you prove it, it's valuable. So I don't want to oversell, I don't want to be optimistic, but the hard part in development is not the long haul. Like once you know something's useful and it has users and it has market value, it's much easier to find Daniel or someone like that and they can do that, but then at least you know it's going to work. Like the hard part is, or the scarce part is that problem part, I believe.
Well, let's be clear. No one's paying us 10 million to develop an app. They're paying us 10 million because they don't know how to solve a problem that we're helping them solve. And we're not building apps, we're building solutions. And I think for us, this is where this technology has been such a game changer, because as you said, the faster that you can solve the validation, get into market, the less money you spend on all the bullshit that you believed was important, but doesn't solve a problem for, let's say, it's somebody with gender-based violence and they care not about all these fancy features, they want to hit an emergency button and they want to be able to test that in the market tomorrow. Suddenly you can solve problems that cost a lot quickly, and then, now I do need to do a little bit of selling to Specno. Specno is figuring out how to distribute a problem, because it doesn't help if you've now developed this amazing solution. It's going to help 1 million lives, but all you can do is speak to 5 people about it. It's going to solve something for everybody. How do you build a commercial entity around scaling access to solution to everybody? All right, I think, sorry. that concludes the panel, I shouldn't say the evening. It's also a nice little segue to thank another one of our partners that in my fluster I had forgotten to do, but one of our OG partners, Next 176, is on a mission to help 1 billion lives. And they are the innovation arm of Old Mutual that is actually trying to make a difference in South Africa. So I also don't want to paint a picture that it's only
us startup junkies that are making a difference. There are actually people in the corporate world that give a shit too. I just want to see more of them. But yeah. Sponsor the event. I'm kidding. But yeah, so maybe to just follow from here, we're going to take a little bit of a break, go get drinks. It's 10 minutes. If there's not more food outside, I'm getting pretty hungry. I'll order pizza for everyone. Who here wants more food? Like, put up your hands. Apparently there is more food, and if it runs out, I'll order pizza.
Pizza's good if you're building your app here.
But yeah, just a reminder, the 2 breakout rooms that we have. So we've got one from our partners, Cloud on Demand. It's really about figuring out how you're going to build the infrastructure. When it comes to building in the cloud, some of the problems that Milan mentioned, it's easy to build an app for 5 people. Are you going to compete against corporate with that vibe code? That's our second session. Our product guys are basically figuring out where does vibe coding go. So if you're on the more technical side of things and you want to figure out your stack and the technology and whatnot, that's in the first session just over here. The other session is the ideas guys. They're at the end. So yeah, we're going to take a little bit of a break. Also just want to give a shout out to my incredible team, who's basically volunteering to throw this event together because they're also passionate about this topic. So maybe we just give them a round of applause quickly. And then one of the things that I also just like to do is to recognize somebody's made the effort to come here tonight, which probably means that they want to make the world a better place. Figure out who you're speaking to, figure out how you can open a door for them or help them, get to creating value for each other in the networking events. It's part of why Specno sponsors, that liquid courage that a lot of you do tend to enjoy. But yeah, this is not about selling shit, it's about building genuine connection, trying to create value for each other and just, I guess, starting a bit of a movement. And then final round of applause for our amazing panelists.